The morning sun cast a golden glow over Liam's flower farm, a vibrant patch of paradise just outside the city limits. Rows of lavender, sunflowers, and wild daisies swayed gently in the breeze, filling the air with their sweet aroma. Liam took a deep breath, savoring the scent of his hard work. This land had been in his family for generations, and after years of city life, he had finally returned to reclaim it, transforming the neglected fields into a thriving business. His peaceful morning was interrupted by the sound of heels clicking against the gravel driveway. Turning, he spotted her. Karen Whitmore, the self-proclaimed queen of the newly developed HOA next door. Dressed in a pristine white pantsuit and oversized sunglasses, she strode toward him with the confidence of someone who believed the world revolved around her. "Liam," she called, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I was just dying to talk to you about a little issue concerning your property." Liam sighed inwardly. Ever since the HOA development sprouted up next to his farm, Karen had made it her mission to improve the neighborhood, which apparently included policing his land, despite the fact that his farm wasn't even part of the HOA. "What issue?" Liam asked, wiping his hands on his jeans. Karen adjusted her sunglasses and gave a tight-lipped smile. "The flowers. They're so lovely, don't you think? Too lovely to be hoarded by just one person. The HOA board has decided that your farm should be considered part of the community's shared green space. That way, residents can enjoy the beauty as well." Liam blinked. "Shared green space." He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You do realize this is private property, right?" Karen waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be selfish. The HOA has a vision, a community that thrives together. Your land is practically an extension of our neighborhood. We'll allow you to continue maintaining it, of course. But access to the flowers should be open to all our residents." Liam's jaw clenched. "That's not happening, Karen. This is my farm, my business. You can't just declare it community property because you feel like it." Karen tusked, shaking her head. "You'll find that the HOA has influence, Liam. It would be a shame if there were complications." She turned on her heel and strutted back toward the road. "Think it over," she called over her shoulder. Liam watched her leave, his fingers tightening into fists. He wasn't about to let some entitled HOA president waltz in and claim his farm like a communal playground. But something in Karen's smug tone unsettled him. As he turned back toward the barn, he caught sight of his beehives, lined up neatly along the far side of the field. A slow smile crept across his face. Maybe he wouldn't have to fight Karen. Maybe, just maybe, she'd learn her lesson the hard way. Liam didn't have to wait long to see exactly what Karen had meant by complications. The very next morning, he found a group of HOA residents wandering through his fields, snipping flowers like it was their personal garden. A middle-aged woman in yoga pants was stuffing her tote bag with fresh lavender. A teenage boy yanked up a handful of sunflowers by the stems, and an elderly couple stood admiring the daisies, oblivious to the fact that they were trampling over his carefully cultivated rows. "Hey," Liam shouted, striding toward them. "What do you think you're doing?" The woman with the tote bag barely glanced up. "Oh, good morning. Karen told us the flower farm was now open for the community. I just love fresh lavender." She inhaled a deep breath and smiled as if she were in a spa, completely ignoring the fury burning in Liam's eyes. "Karen told you what?" Liam growled. "That you've generously agreed to share," the teenage boy piped up. "She posted it in the HOA group chat, said it was a community enrichment initiative. Pretty cool of you, dude." Liam's nostrils flared. "This is private property. None of you have permission to be here." The elderly couple looked at each other in confusion, but the woman with the tote scoffed. "Oh, don't be so stingy. They always say small farms need more community support. We're supporting you." She held up her stolen lavender with a bright grin. Liam took a deep breath, trying to keep his temper in check. "Last warning, get off my land, and if I catch anyone trespassing again, I'll call the sheriff." The teenage boy muttered something under his breath, but they all reluctantly shuffled back toward the HOA neighborhood. As soon as they were gone, Liam stormed inside and grabbed his phone. He scrolled through the local community forums until he found it, Karen's HOA announcement. In the spirit of neighborhood unity, our board has arranged access to the beautiful flower fields adjacent to our community. This shared space is now open for all HOA residents to enjoy. Please be mindful and take only what you need. Liam clenched his jaw so hard it hurt. She wasn't just encouraging this, she had declared it as if she had the right to do so. Enough was enough. Karen had officially crossed the line. He stepped outside, his gaze drifting toward the beehives at the edge of his property. His bees had been working hard all season, and the honey was just about ready for harvest. A slow, wicked grin spread across his face. If Karen and her cronies wanted access to his farm so badly, maybe it was time to let them have it. Liam spent the next few days keeping an eye on his property, and sure enough, the trespassing continued. Despite his warning, HOA residents still wandered onto his farm like it was a public park. Some picked flowers, others posed for Instagram pictures, and one particularly bold woman even brought a pair of garden shears to cut entire bouquets. Karen, of course, was nowhere to be seen. She let her minions do the dirty work. Liam considered calling the sheriff, but he knew how that would go. The HOA would claim it was a misunderstanding, maybe even try to paint him as the aggressive farmer bullying a friendly neighborhood. No, he needed a better plan. A lesson that would make everyone think twice before setting foot on his land again. And he had just the thing. His bees were ready. Liam had been keeping bees for years, mostly for pollination and honey production. The hives were tucked away in a far corner of the property, safely out of the way of visitors. Well, visitors who had permission to be there. Right now, the hives were at peak capacity, meaning thousands of hardworking little pollinators were buzzing with energy. More importantly, they were highly protective of their honey. That's when Liam had a deliciously ironic idea. He spent the next day setting up wooden signs around the hives. They read, "Caution, active beehives, do not disturb." But just to make sure the message was clear, he strategically placed a few of them closer to the flower fields, hoping the HOA folks would take the hint. Of course, Karen and her crew weren't exactly known for following rules. And just to make things interesting, Liam decided to move some of his harvesting frames, full of honey and busy bees, closer to the exact area where the trespassers liked to roam. A little extra encouragement for nature to take its course. It was a simple plan, really. He wouldn't have to lift a finger. All he had to do was wait. And knowing Karen's insufferable arrogance, she'd be the first one to walk straight into it. Liam didn't have to wait long for the show to begin. That Saturday morning, he spotted Karen striding confidently onto his land, followed by a small group of HOA residents. She was dressed in another one of her pristine white outfits, this time a flowing blouse and slacks, as if she were attending a garden party instead of trespassing on private property. A few of the other residents carried baskets, clearly planning to help themselves to his flowers once again. Liam leaned against his porch railing, arms crossed, watching as they marched right past his "no trespassing" signs without a care in the world. Karen stopped in the middle of the field, inhaling deeply like she owned the place. "Isn't this just fabulous?" she said, spinning in place with a delighted smile. "A true gift to our community." One of the men beside her frowned at the signs Liam had placed near the hives. Karen, what's with the bee warnings?" Karen waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, please, Liam," just trying to scare us off. "Beekeepers love their bees. They wouldn't put them anywhere dangerous," she huffed. "Honestly, this is exactly why I had to take charge. Some people just don't understand sharing." Liam bit back a grin. "Oh, Karen, you have no idea what you're about to walk into." Ignoring the warning signs, Karen strutted further into the flower field, right toward the strategically placed beehive frames. The warm sun and sweet scent of the flowers had drawn out dozens of worker bees, lazily hovering around the area. Most people with common sense would have been cautious. Karen, naturally, was not most people. With a dramatic sigh, she dropped onto a low wooden box, the very same box that contained a particularly active hive frame. "Ah," she sighed, leaning back with a satisfied smile. "Now this is what community enrichment looks like." For a second, everything was still. Then, a loud, angry buzz erupted beneath her. Karen froze, her expression twisted from satisfaction to confusion as she felt the vibration beneath her. Then came the first sting. Then another's. And another's. Karen's mouth opened in a silent scream as she launched herself off the hive box. "Oh my God, BEES, BEES," she shrieked, flailing wildly. The other HOA members immediately panicked, swatting at the air as the disturbed hive sent out dozens of irritated bees. Karen's flailing only made things worse, agitating the swarm even more. "Run," someone yelled. Liam watched with deep satisfaction as Karen sprinted across his field, waving her arms like a lunatic. Her once pristine white outfit was now covered in dirt, her hair a tangled mess as she tried to escape the buzzing cloud chasing her. By the time she reached the edge of his property, she was gasping for breath, red welts already forming on her arms. She turned back, wild-eyed, and saw Liam still leaning casually against the porch, watching the whole thing unfold. His smirk was the cherry on top. "Oh, Karen," he called out, unable to hide his amusement. "Looks like the community doesn't want to share after all." Karen stood at the edge of Liam's property, panting, swatting at her clothes as if bees were still clinging to her. Her once pristine white blouse was now streaked with dirt and sweat, her perfect blonde bob frizzing at the edges. The HOA members who had followed her into the field were in similar states of distress. One woman was yanking at her hair, convinced a bee was still tangled in it, while another man furiously wiped at his arms, covered in red welts. Liam took his sweet time strolling down from the porch. "Everything all right, Karen?" he asked, voice dripping with amusement. Karen turned on him, her face red with fury. You planted those bees there," she screeched. Liam arched an eyebrow. "Planted them? Karen, they're beehives. I've had them for years. Maybe if you hadn't ignored the giant warning signs, you wouldn't have had such a memorable experience." One of the HOA members, still wheezing, muttered, "I told you those signs were real." Karen whipped around and glared at him before turning back to Liam. "This is unacceptable. You can't just weaponize nature against your own neighbors." Liam chuckled. "I didn't do anything, Karen. The bees did. And let's be real, you weren't exactly acting like a neighbor, were you?" Karen's nostrils flared. "I'm reporting this to the HOA board. This is an attack on the community." Liam crossed his arms. "Oh, you mean your HOA board? That has zero authority over my farm? Yeah, go ahead. Let me know how that works out for you." The other HOA members were starting to back away, clearly realizing they had followed Karen into something they wanted no part of. One woman whispered, "Maybe we should just leave the farm alone." Karen's jaw tightened, but even she could tell she had lost this round. With a huff, she straightened her dirt-streaked blouse and stomped back toward the HOA neighborhood, her entourage limping after her. Liam watched them go, shaking his head in amusement, but he wasn't done yet. If Karen thought this was bad, she had no idea what he had planned next. Karen wasn't the type to back down easily. Liam knew that much, so it didn't surprise him when 2 days later she was back, this time with reinforcements. A group of HOA board members marched onto his property, led by Karen, who was now wearing a ridiculous wide-brimmed hat and a scarf, likely to cover the lingering bee stings on her neck. A short, balding man in a polo shirt stepped forward, clearing his throat importantly. "Mr. Dawson," he said, adjusting his glasses, "we've come to formally discuss your hostile actions against the HOA community." Liam leaned against his fence, utterly unimpressed. "Hostile actions? You mean my bees defending their home?" Karen scoffed. "Enough with the theatrics, Liam. Your farm is directly next to our neighborhood, which means it affects the entire community. The HOA board has reviewed the situation and decided that your hazardous beehives are a safety risk. We demand that you remove them immediately." Liam bit back a laugh. "Oh, you demand that, do you?" The balding man nodded, folding his arms. "If you refuse, the HOA will be forced to take legal action for endangering residents." Liam rubbed his chin as if thinking it over. Then, with a completely straight face, he said, Well, that's interesting, because I was just about to take legal action myself. Karen blinked. Excuse me. Liam pulled out his phone and scrolled for a moment before holding it up. See, I installed a few security cameras after you lot started treating my farm like a public park. And would you look at that? I've got plenty of footage of HOA members trespassing, stealing my flowers, and oh yeah, blatantly ignoring my warning signs. The HOA board members shifted uncomfortably. Liam smiled. Now I could report this to the sheriff's office. I'm sure they'd love to have a chat about property laws, or, he let the word hang in the air, you all can agree right now to stay the hell off my land. Karen's face turned an impressive shade of red. You can't blackmail us like this. Liam smirked. It's not blackmail, Karen, it's consequences. The balding man cleared his throat. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach. Karen turned to him in outrage. But we were trespassing, Karen, another board member muttered. He has us on video. Karen opened and closed her mouth, her eye twitching. Finally, she turned back to Liam and spat. Fine, but this isn't over. Liam grinned. Oh, I think it is. Karen stomped off, and the HOA board reluctantly followed. As they disappeared back into their precious neighborhood, Liam chuckled to himself. The bees had taught them one lesson. His cameras had taught them another. And Karen, well, he had a feeling she wouldn't be showing her face near his farm anytime soon. For the next few weeks, Liam enjoyed a blissful Karen-free existence. The HOA members no longer trespassed on his farm, and his flowers remained untouched. Even the usual nosy neighborhood walkers now kept their distance, casting wary glances at his property as if expecting another bee apocalypse. But Karen, she had gone unusually quiet. Too quiet. Liam wasn't naive enough to think she had given up. No, Karen was like a stubborn weed. Cut her down, and she'd just find another way to grow back. So when he spotted a county inspector's truck pulling up to his driveway one morning, he knew exactly who was behind it. The inspector, a stocky man with a clipboard, stepped out and adjusted his belt. Mr. Dawson. Liam wiped his hands on his jeans. That's me. What's this about? The inspector sighed. We received multiple complaints from the HOA regarding environmental hazards, specifically that your beehives are a public nuisance and pose a danger to nearby residents. Liam barked out a laugh. Let me guess, Karen Whitmore. The inspector flipped through his papers. I can't disclose who filed the complaints, but yeah, it was all from the same person. He looked up, clearly unimpressed. Honestly, this is the 5th ridiculous HOA complaint I've had to deal with this month. These hives properly registered. Liam nodded. Fully licensed, regularly maintained, and perfectly legal. I even follow additional environmental safety measures. The inspector smirked. Thought so. Look, I just have to check the paperwork, snap a few pictures, and then I can file this under another HOA tantrum. Liam grinned. Be my guest. As the inspector worked, Liam leaned against his fence, watching Karen's house from a distance. Sure enough, her blinds twitched. She was watching. He gave a little wave. The blind snapped shut. 10 minutes later, the inspector handed Liam back his paperwork. Everything's in order. She's got no case. I'll file my report today. If she keeps complaining, she'll be the one in trouble for false claims. Liam chuckled, music to my ears. As the inspector drove off, Liam made a mental note. Karen wasn't done playing games. But neither was he. If she wanted a lesson in real consequences, he'd make sure it was one she'd never forget. Liam didn't have to wait long for Karen's next move. 3 days after the failed inspection stunt, he received an official-looking letter in his mailbox. Bold HOA letterhead, overly formal language, and of course, Karen's signature at the bottom. The letter was pure nonsense. Dear Mr. Dawson, due to ongoing safety concerns, the HOA has decided that the presence of active beehives near our community is unacceptable. As such, we are imposing a mandatory removal request. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines and legal action. We trust that you will make the responsible decision for the well-being of the neighborhood. Sincerely, Karen Whitmore, HOA President. Liam read it twice, then burst out laughing. Karen still thought she could control him, still thought her HOA had power over a farm that wasn't even in their jurisdiction. Oh, she was delusional. And Liam, he was about to have some fun with this. The very next morning, he drove into town and printed out his own official-looking response, making sure to use extra legal-sounding wording. He even added a fancy little stamp to make it look important. Then, with great satisfaction, he hand-delivered it, right to Karen's doorstep. She answered in her usual dramatic fashion, swinging the door open with an air of superiority. But when she saw the envelope in Liam's hand, her smug expression faltered. "What's this?" she asked suspiciously. Liam smiled. "Oh, just a little response to your removal request." Karen snatched the letter and opened it. As her eyes scanned the words, her face went from pale to horrified. Dear Ms. Whitmore, we regret to inform you that your request for the removal of legally maintained agricultural assets, i.e., beehives, has been denied. Furthermore, due to multiple instances of harassment, trespassing, and unauthorized claims over private property, a formal complaint has been filed with the county. Should these actions persist, legal measures will be taken against you and the HOA board for unlawful interference with a private business. Additionally, due to repeated disturbances caused by HOA members trespassing on active farm property, we will be installing additional beehives closer to the shared property line to ensure the full pollination of all floral areas. We trust that you will make the responsible decision for the well-being of the neighborhood. Sincerely, Liam Dawson, owner of Dawson Flower Farm. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You can't do this," she sputtered. Liam grinned. "Oh, I can, and I will. You wanted to control my land. Now you can enjoy the buzzing benefits right up against your backyard." Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. This is harassment." Liam leaned in just slightly. "So is trespassing, Karen. So are false complaints. But hey, if you really want to keep pushing this, we can let the courts decide." Karen let out a strangled noise, then spun on her heel and slammed the door shut so hard the windows rattled. Liam stood there for a moment, enjoying the victory. Then, whistling to himself, he strolled back to his farm, where his bees continued to work happily, pollinating his thriving flowers. From that day forward, no HOA member ever dared set foot on his land again. And Karen, she learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, Mother Nature delivers justice better than any court ever could.